part of me thinks, well, if a woman wants to do that, if they want to be part of a consensual transaction, then all power to her. But at the same time, there are startlingly worrying figures about all the other nefarious activities relating to prostitution. Is decriminalising it on behalf of the prostitute the best way forward, or should it be fully decriminalised or fully criminalised? Where would you stand?
I mean, I've discussed it. I've discussed it on my podcast, Say Your Mind. I've discussed the fact that it's important for us to listen to sex workers. I think that the main issue that we have in Britain is that sex workers weren't actually consulted about whether it should be criminalised or decriminalised. So we're having conversations around sex workers. I mean, I'm here today also talking about sex workers, but I work with sex workers, and being that almost palatable voice to speak on their behalf, but I would prefer if they were able to speak for themselves. But why are they not able to speak for themselves? Because we exist in a society that has already shamed women when it comes to the notion of sex. And everything exists on the spectrum. So we are looking specifically at decriminalising or not sex work, but that still exists on the spectrum of a woman who may be in a relationship with a man who would then take her images and want to put it online, or use that in a way to kind of whether blackmail or to just do things. But we wouldn't be able to do that in a society where women were able to participate equally in sex and to be seen as equal members. But sex in our society is about power. And so when we are talking about decriminalisation, what are we talking about? If we're talking about power, we should surely give power to the people who want to engage in this way. And also, it would help us to not convolute and conflate sex trafficking with sex work.
Well, let's talk about that, because, I mean, how on earth, and unless this industry is in some way regulated or, you know, actually talked about and pulled out of stigma, how on earth can we go about the very difficult business of being able to find out the women who are there consensually, who are happy to be there doing that work, and the women who really are not, and perhaps they've been trafficked, or perhaps they're just extremely vulnerable?
I look at the New Zealand model, because most times we cite the Nordic model, but I look at the New Zealand model.
So let's talk about the Nordic model. Is decriminalising the sex worker.
Yes, but criminalising.
Not the client.
Yes, but not the client.
And the New Zealand model is?
And just decriminalising it. And I think they've had that since around 2003. And they've seen a reduction in harm against sex workers. And I think that that's the most important thing. The more that we push sex workers into the shadows, the more dangerous it actually becomes for them. And if we say that we're going to criminalise the people who purchase sex or, you know, purchase any sort of service within that realm, then what that does is it makes it a buyer's market, and it makes it even harder for these people to make a living, and it makes it very dangerous for them as well, because they can't really pick and choose who they actually want to engage with. And so they're having to maybe engage with more people or different types of people that they wouldn't usually take on as clients. So we talk about what can we do to make sure that we're hearing the voices of the people that want to share their experiences, whether they might be terrible or whether they like being there. The only way we can do that is specifically as women. I don't really focus on men in this situation. Specifically as women, we have to get past our false dichotomy when it comes to the virgin whore complex that, if you do this, if you engage and you participate in this way, it's dirty, it's shameful in some way, because then we can look across at other women having different experiences and hold space for them.
Is there not a risk, though, that via fully decriminalising sex work, in order to protect those people involved in that industry, that there's a risk of potentially normalising the concept of a woman's body being for sale?
I think that's really, really interesting, because is it only in sex work that a woman's body is for sale? Literally everywhere a woman's body is for sale. People are chosen to be, you know, the poster people for various organisations because subliminally we are selling sex all of the time. We're selling women's bodies all of the time. The issue here is the woman having the autonomy to describe and to dictate the, you know, confines within which that transaction is going to be made. I would go as far as to say marriage, traditionally, is the selling of a woman's body, really, but people have reclaimed that. They found romance in that. So why can't we start looking at ways, the nuances when we talk about women and power and bodies and sex specifically, what are we saying?
And when it comes to sex workers that you've had the opportunity to speak to and talk to, are they sort of held together, psychologically secure people who have chosen to do this? Or have they got pretty dark backstories that have led them to this particular industry, and they're struggling with it and want to leave?
I think that it can be a combination of both. I've recently, as an actor, been working with an incredible writer who was a sex worker. I don't know if they're still working in that field, but reading their stories and wanting to bring that forward for them, there was a combination of different themes that take place. But even in my human experience, I've also had dark experiences. So, and, you know, experiences that would have affected my mental state. Basically, what I'm saying is that our human experiences are just on a spectrum. They're vast, and we can't say people engage in this or decide to work in this field because of deep psychological issues, because really, who doesn't have them?
Quite. And in terms of, you know, if you were to decriminalise, not you, but if this country were to decriminalise prostitution, do you think the model should be something a bit like Amsterdam, where, you know, you end up with red light districts and windows where women are able to advertise their wares, so to speak? Or is that sort of taking the concept too far? What would be a sort of good model? Is it brothels? Is it red light districts? Or is it actually just decriminalising it and letting women choose how they go about soliciting?
Yeah, I think the healthiest thing that you or I could do in this situation is say that we don't know. We have to see. But from what I've been told, the New Zealand model is really what a lot of sex workers would prefer, because from what I've heard about how it sort of operates in Amsterdam, the power still ultimately remains with men, and they can have like super clubs and they can have all of these things where sex workers aren't really being paid very well. So it might look all glitzy and glamoury, but they're not getting much in that. And undocumented people also can't still participate in a safe way in that industry.
Kelechi, thank you so much for coming. It's been utterly fascinating talking to you. Delighted to have you here.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.